Here we are for the final conversation. That's right? Or the first conversation?
Nope.
No,
First
the
conversation.
The first. It's the first.
Now I know that Kim read the book already.
Yeah.
Oh my God, this is the first conversation. This is bad. Anyway, so yes, here we are. I obviously thought we were somewhere else already once, but we weren't. So here we are for the very first time ever to discuss the absolutely true diary of a part-time Indian. By who? I don't remember.
Sherman Alexis?
Sherman Alexis.
Alexis.
Good name.
I agree. I like the Alexi.
I feel like this is another example of I thought this book was a memoir. And it's like a theme, I think.
It's kind of a memoir, though. Like the author did base it on his experiences.
Right.
Even though it's not literally, this is what happened to me specifically. I'm admitting.
Right. That's why it's interesting, because the title is like the absolutely true.
Yeah.
And you're like, well.
Yeah.
But it's full of truths. So I guess that's the point.
It's full
But
of
anyway.
their truths. I also thought it was a memoir. Like the first couple of chapters I was reading, I totally thought it was a memoir. And then as I was like reading more, I was like, is it? I can't super tell. But yeah, the first part, like just kind of that backstory of him explaining like his life growing up and stuff. Yeah, I was like, oh cool, we're reading this person's whole life or whatever. But it, kind of changed a bit later.
Yeah, I thought it was a memoir too, and I even went to the back to read about him, and I was like, oh, maybe not, because I was trying to look, because you know how he says he has like one eye's short-sighted and one eye's near-sighted, and all
yeah,
these
I forgot
things he
about
says,
that.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
So I was like trying to look at his picture of the author, and I was like, I wonder if he's got like laser eye surgery or something. Like I was like, I thought it was a memoir too, and then I realized I was like, remember when it says a novel by? A novel means it's not a memoir. So don't make that mistake like you did with when Dad.
Oh no, but listen.
killed
Okay, so
Mom.
I'm on his Wikipedia page. So he was born with hydrocephalus
Oh,
Okay.
for the fluid in the brain situation.
Yeah.
He had to have brain surgery 6 months old.
Oh wow.
So scary.
His parents were alcoholics, though his mother achieved sobriety. Sorry, I'm just like reading and reporting things at the same time. So
We're trying to be
That's
good
fine.
listeners.
I know. He
Doesn't
excelled
like-
academically, reading everything available, including auto repair manuals.
Nice.
Oh.
Little sample of how his
Right.
story and his life overlap.
It's interesting. I like it. Like I think like writing a biography sometimes would be tough or a memoir, because like there's other people that might not want to be written about.
Yeah.
You know? So that's interesting.
Or just even the experiences they may have had could be so different for the other people. And then say they ended up reading the book and they're like, that's not what happened. That's not their absolute truth, So that could be so tough. I feel like that would be the hardest part about writing like a biography memoir type of thing. Is
for
that
sure.
yeah.
Unless you wait till like everybody you're gonna write about is dead. Just like wait till you're really
So
old.
morbid.
So you just go on a killing spree, actually.
Finally,
No, not
George
evil.
died.
That would make
Like,
such a better
I-
story. I just wanted to write my life story, but instead I had to kill everybody so that I could write my life story. So now I'm writing this crazy
So that's
murder
the book
mystery.
I will read. I'm gonna write that.
That's a
book
good
from
murder
prison.
mystery.
Yeah,
Write the first
totally.
book?
It's a good plan.
Amazing.
You'd have all the time you needed to write.
Is it a good
Oh
book?
god, yeah.
I mean, it's a good plan if you felt like you didn't have enough time to write your story.
And also, it would be like a murder mystery, right?
I don't know.
Oh, totally.
But it would
That
be
would-
such a, like at the end, it would be like, it was me, haha. Now I'm in prison. Spoiler.
No, I'm a person. No, I mean like you write your memoir and wait until everyone dies, but publish it so then they don't feel upset.
Okay. And then
Oh,
also,
see, that's
what if
that's
you
not
died
what I was
first,
thinking.
In your will, you'd have to be like, when everyone else in this story dies, publish this book. Haha.
Yeah.
I got the last laugh or the last
Like-
word.
The last
Sorry,
word.
My
Your
perspective reigns.
Your publishing house has been taken over by Rogers. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm Roger.
You don't have a contract anymore.
I've been watching a lot of murder mysteries recently because I'm
Mhm.
visiting my mother, and that's all she watches is murder
loves
mysteries, and
murder.
all she reads is murder mysteries. And so when you guys are talking about that, that's all I could think about. I'm like, that might be a
Yeah.
good one. There
Oh,
was
your mom
one
would love
where
it.
she would love it. So Mare,
Yeah,
get on
totally.
that. Write a
Get
book
on
about
that killing spree, Mare.
A
killing
memoir.
everyone, so you can write a memoir.
I guess they'll have to get rid of them before this chapter is released. It'd be more interesting if it was like a serial in a newspaper. You know how they used to do that? Or like you
Yes.
like
Oh,
a little
yeah.
bit at a time,
Yes.
and the person happens to die right before it's published.
Every time.
Every time. Dun, dun, dun.
That's like Stephen Kingy.
Oh,
man.
totally. Yeah, yeah. That would be such a good TV show, I feel like. You know?
Person would have to have a very interesting life where, like, at first, like, you wouldn't think these people were connected until the story comes out.
Oh, like until the very end too, where it shows how everyone was intertwined and connected.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like you're the one person, like you're the
Yes.
6 degrees of Kevin Bacon or whatever, but you're
Yeah.
concealed until the finale. Or
So
whatever.
Kevin Bacon would have to star in it, of course.
Obviously, he would be the first death.
The first one. Make it the most meaningful.
Oh,
It's like when
man.
you remember when Scream first came out and Drew Barrymore, spoiler alert, all of you who haven't seen Scream from 25 years ago, Drew Barrymore gets murdered in the first like 20 minutes.
Scene?
Everyone's like,
yeah.
nobody thought they'd kill her. She's a main character.
Yeah, that
Oh.
was good. Yeah.
Decoy.
Yeah.
Decoy.
So
Okay.
back to this book. How far has anyone? How far has anyone got? Like
I read the
I'm
whole
done.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I read the
done.
whole thing.
Oh my
I'm not.
god. Okay, I'm not either. I would say so I'm listening to the audiobook and the audiobook is just under 5 hours and I have just over 2 left.
Okay, so what's
Right on.
happening right now in the book? Because then
Yeah.
I'll talk about the stuff beforehand.
Yeah,
not-
yeah.
I haven't gone beyond Halloween. He's moved to the new
Okay.
school and he's made friends. Do you have some? Has he made friends with anyone, Ashley, at the new school?
Sorry, I'm just trying to think. I just went to a wedding yesterday, so my brain
Oh.
is so foggy a little bit. Yeah. I'm sorry. He made friends at his new school. Yeah, he did.
That's
Check
all
where
I'm
my
at.
bookmark is. Yeah.
He thought he was going to be in a fight with a bully.
Yes.
And then he punched the bully, and now the bully's his friend.
Yeah,
and
he went
that's
all
his-
like more extreme than they expected at his new school, which is awesome. He's like, "This is just the rules. What's going on?" Right? Like,
I love that
Yeah.
he called back. He's like, "What's the rules?" And he's like, "What?" And he's like, "Oh."
yeah, playground rules change, I guess, depending on your school. So that's fun.
I think
That's
this book would make
yeah.
a good movie.
Yeah.
So I moved schools from Ontario to BC. So I did high school in BC and then did all my other schooling in Ontario up to that. And the rules totally different. So
Oh my God.
I was relating so hard. Like, what are the rules? Like, could someone just tell me? You know, because
Yeah.
they were just so different. And you act one way and it's totally normal from where you came from. And then people are like, what are you doing? You know, like it's just totally so I related to that. Really, I felt like I was going to a new school again.
I had that same experience, like not even moving schools, just moving the provinces too, because I moved from
Yes.
Ontario to BC as well.
Yeah.
And I like right away noticed the difference. Like even when I came on my first vacation, I was like, oh my gosh, like,
Oh yeah.
and I was so surprised that even within the same country, it could be so different. But when I came here, I was like, holy, and I preferred the differences in BC. I was like, that's the way I want to do it. Like,
I feel the
Yeah, it is-
same way, Kim.
it is
When
very
I go
obvious.
home. Yes, when I go home to Ontario, like obviously it's nice to visit, but I try and tell them about how different life is in BC, and you know they can't even grasp it.
yeah,
I just
Ontario's
feel- yeah,
exhausting. It's just
totally
exhausting.
is. It
It's
is.
like you're in a race and you're like,
Yes.
I didn't sign up for this race, but everyone's racing everywhere.
Yeah,
like,
and I don't
why
want to
are
live
we-
here.
Well, it is the
People
center
are
of the
cutting you
universe.
off, and
So
you're like,
Well, yeah.
it's you feel like you're in a race with everything. Everything feels like a
Totally,
race.
yeah.
And you're just like, I'm
Yeah.
not racing anymore. So,
and it's
you know.
like intangible. You don't
Yes.
realize, you know what I mean? Like I didn't realize till I came here, and I was like, even just in
They don't even
in
know.
like niceness, like the thing that I can remember being really obvious to me, and I mean this may be different now, I don't think so though, but when we came to BC, there's like, if you're sitting on a patio, like giant picnic tables, so
Mhm.
like you and people you don't know might sit at the same table, and you might even speak to each other. And like
Yes.
it was like weird at first, and
Totally.
like I feel like if you were to yell over, even, and you could also do it across the patio to another table that's not even attached to you, and be like, hey, where'd you get your pants? And they're like, oh, whatever. But if you did that in Ontario, people are like, are they talking to me? Like, who is that? Do you know them? Like,
You know them?
like there's
No,
this
totally.
weird like, and I was, as Ontario, at first uncomfortable, but then I was like, this is, everybody is so friendly.
Yes.
Book interrupted.
So, this interruption is brought to you by my stolen laptop. So, you might be wondering why we didn't have an episode, and if you didn't listen to our episode interruption that Kara did for us, you wouldn't know that the reason we didn't have an episode last month is because just before I was finishing editing that episode and putting it out, my laptop was stolen. And it turns out a bunch of the stuff I couldn't recover. Some things I could, some things I couldn't. So I couldn't recover my work, but I could recover most of the raw files. So I had to start again. Luckily, I have a desktop. It's a bit clunky, but thankfully, Apple helped me with that too. So now all of my things sync to the cloud, so I won't lose things in the future. And my desktop is working better than ever. So, not so bad after all. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. And yeah, that was a real interruption.
Book interrupted.
Should we talk about the book?
Yes.
That's about
Yes.
Zelda.
You know what I think about this book? I think that like on the surface, it's just this good story. He goes over there, he has a fight, he meets a friend, like, etc. But I also think there's a lot of like nuanced examples of like implicit bias and
Mhm.
microaggressions, and you know, and I think he does a pretty good job of capturing how subtle all of that can be, because
Mhm.
like it's not right out in the open, but I still think it's there.
Mhm.
And so
for
I
sure.
think it was a good vehicle to try to bring those kind of experiences to light, because you know, he was a Native person who went into what's known to be a white school, and then that experience kind of provided the stage for those things to play out in ways that are easier to observe than just describing it, I guess.
Mhm. Mhm.
The beginning of the book for me. So, like, what do you guys think about that teacher? Like, why he went to the school? He's like, go where there's hope. Like, you still have hope. Like, not being mad that he punched him. He's like, I deserve to be punched, basically.
Yeah, he was like ashamed of himself.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
basically,
Mhm.
like
The teacher, I mean.
the teacher
Yeah.
was. Yeah. And he was like, you need to go where hope is. Who did he ask where hope is? Like, who has hope? Where's the most
Might have-
hope?
Yeah, who has the most hope?
Yeah, I can't remember who
Might
said
have been
it.
his
It was
mom. I think it might
his
have been his
mom,
mom.
and he's like, white people. And he was like, okay, I'm going to that school. Like, tomorrow. Like, it was-
Tomorrow.
yeah.
So I think from experience, and then also just from, so I was raised very white, did not learn really about like any indigenous culture other than that it happened, and it was also in the beginning, one of the things he had said was like he was born into poverty, and they were basically told all their lives, you know, that they're not good, they're not enough, and how are they supposed to change that lifestyle if they're told that their whole life and then they start believing it. And I thought that was so on point for how I think a lot of Indigenous people still currently feel. Because even I have friends who live on reserve, even friends that don't, and you know, they have that internal belief like, I'm not good enough to be going working in like a white area or going to school and type of thing. So I think it's interesting to see that some of those underlying themes are still currently, I think, happening in Indigenous communities.
I think that hope conversation is a reflection of what you're talking about. Exactly that, right?
Yeah. Oh, totally. It was kind of nice at the beginning to be able to relate a lot of things and be like, oh my gosh, this is such a native thing. Even sometimes the way he talked and some of the things, I was like, me and my friends talk like this. And so just the jokes, the type of jokes, I felt like are type of jokes I make too. And so I felt it was almost like reading my life too at some points, growing up and having some of the same things that like he went through, obviously not to as extreme because I'm not disabled, but I thought it was interesting from an Indigenous perspective.
I felt lucky to be able to like read that perspective because I can't have it except for to be able to like, you know, get behind the curtain in reading a book or whatever. And it's shocking. And so like as a white person and some of the things that he talks about or just acknowledges as normal, right? You're like, holy, like that's just the way that it is. Like walking 14 miles. It's like, well, I guess I'm going to walk 14 miles home. And like, and that's just the top of my head example, right? I don't know. That's why I think it's important that we keep on checking it out. Like, cause you know, or I don't know where this came from or whatever, but like if you don't know about people or if you are at risk of discrimination or bias, the best way that you can help yourself is to try to find some people that are not like you and hang out with them. You know what I mean? So like that's the best move, I think, is always to like, that's how you can learn, because you need to have other examples in front of you instead of like reinforcing the sameness that you come from.
Yeah, absolutely.
What you're saying, Kim, there was parts in the book like when his dad was dropping him off at the school and he said, you know, those white people aren't better than you. And he says in it, I know he doesn't believe that. And neither do I. And I was like, that kind of statement blew me away. I was like, what? Yeah. So reading what he's thinking just changed. It changed because I didn't realize that he felt like that with his parents. Do you know what I mean? That his parents didn't think that either. Like they don't actually believe it. Yeah. So I agree. It helps with that, like getting into someone's head, because the way he does it too, the book is great because it's so young. Like his thoughts are so young that there's almost like the way he's narrating in his head is like super pure and super innocent. So it really makes you get it. Like it is like the absolute true diary. Like you really kind of get it. And him drawing pictures to make fun of himself and of the guy he punched the nose and his buddy, like all these things, like you get an idea. Anyway, I really like it too, because it really does make you like in his perspective, the way it's been written and drawn, and it kind of like, it really engages you, the book, because there's pictures and there's words and it's very, innocent.
It's like the age of the character, because he's a teenager. It's like, I think one of the things that people, during those formative years, you're a teenager, you're trying to figure out where your like loyalties lie. And I think that's like a lot of what this book is about, is like loyalty to other people in your life and to yourself and to your past self and future self, and like how you balance all that. And it's just like complicated because he's changing schools and there's people who, like his friend is feeling like he's betraying him, he's not being loyal and saying something, that his going to the school is saying something negative about him. So like it's not just I like that theme of loyalty in the book, because if he was a different age and moving, there would be those themes. But when you're a teenager, that's kind of where you're not going to be focused so much on your parents as you were before. You're focusing more on your friends and connecting with them as well. So like, and it's like very powerful how he kind of almost subtly shows the struggle that a lot of teenagers go through, but it's just like it's complicated by kind of like the cultural clashing that's happening
Like
here.
colonialism.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like makes it so much more difficult, because it's hard enough like going through that age and trying to figure out where you fit in and where you want to be and how you can be, you know, still honor the person you were and where you came from, but also change from your parents and your family and all that stuff. So it's interesting the time period that this book was written in, because I think it just magnifies everything, all of that as well, by choosing a teenager to show like it's even harder to be a teenager in this character's case.
Yeah, and also showing that I think as society we still need to show empathy towards like youth. You know, I remember growing up and complaining about things that I felt were really hard at the time, and still even looking back I think they were really hard, and hearing from adults so many times, you're a kid, you don't pay bills, you don't do this or this, you have it so good, etc. And there will always be positives to things, you know, but it's also okay to be like, this is tough, and to talk about it and not just have that toxic positivity, because, you know, it's, yes, of course there are these awesome things that are happening, but also life's tough, you know, and talking about that toughness can help bring other people together and be like, hey, I'm not alone, other people are experiencing this and this is normal. Or maybe not normal or right, but there's so many people experiencing it, we can change it.
Yeah, and talking about it makes it easier to deal with, because people are like, oh, I deal with that too, or whatever.
Yeah. I also like how this book showed, like, in spite of, you know, what you would at surface judge as negative, like alcoholism in a family or poverty or whatever, and these things are also attached to Indigenous people as like all that they are, kind of thing, in worst case scenarios. This book also really was competent at showing there's a lot of love. Like it's not a simplified, like, you know what I mean? It's not just like this equals bad, poor them. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah, that's not ideal. That also is the result of, you know, intergenerational years of trauma. And there still is love, you know, and there's like, there's still this family unit, like a glowing ember within, you know, the whatever, all of the negativity that is the outcome of it. And I also think that there could be a way to look at this book. Him going to this new school and being accepted is almost like the fantasy of rewriting history, where like, you know, like white people were like, you shouldn't be here, and we're hoping to eradicate you. Like that's the messaging for natives, right? And it's like, and so that's why they don't have the self-esteem. That's why they don't feel like they're as good as enough, because that messaging has been everywhere always. And so him going over to this white school and like fighting for a minute and then like becoming part of it and being a valued member of it, I think is a cool way to look at like a rewriting of history too, in a microcosm little story.
And also showing that kids don't care. Like, you know, at the end of the day, we're taught that hate, and we're taught to not trust different things. And I think at the end of the day, like, people want to connect, and it doesn't really matter, or it shouldn't matter, you know, the race, gender, ethnicity, etc. And I think that's one thing that's so pure about youth, is they don't have that hate unless it's like instilled in them, or it's, you know, really like taught to them. And they will play with people, like they will play with other kids and be like, we're twins, and could be totally different races, right? But because they both have the same haircut, they think they're twins, and that's so cute and pure. And so I think that is also kind of showing too that kids want to connect at any age, and you know, like they'll find their people, and when they do, it can be such a beautiful thing. And you might not fit in your first or second place, but there is a spot for you somewhere, and you will find that group of people that you're supposed to be with. Mm-hmm. I also wanted to touch base on there was fighting, you know, like the main character would get so upset. I feel like they were pushed to their limits multiple times, and then would finally fight back, and they were the one that got in trouble every time. And it's like, you know, you push someone to their tipping point, and they're so cruel to this person, and then once they explode, you know, then they're then demonized. And I think that happened a couple of times, in the sense that, you know, when he threw the book and he hit his teacher, he thought he was going to jail, you know?
Yeah.
Like he just, you know, and he was just like, oh, you know, like when this kind of stuff happens, it's so extreme, he's going to jail. Like, you know, I think it's hard when people are being bullied, or they're in like a lower socioeconomic status society or community, and they're just like, he really was, you know, he was so upset. That book was 30 years old. He was so upset that he was being bullied, etc., etc. That's a totally normal,
It's
you
the
know, being so
straw.
upset. Yes, yes. And
Totally
you know,
reasonable. Yeah.
he got suspended, and then, you know, he got in trouble, etc. And it's, what about the people that brought him to that
It's
point,
like,
you know?
if you put somebody in a desperate situation, well, then desperate people do desperate things. Like, you can't
Absolutely.
predict, right?
Yeah.
It's like, maybe the best way to not make somebody do desperate things is to not put them in a desperate situation.
Yeah.
Where they have
or
no
not
options.
treat them like shit, you know?
Right, where they don't have any choices, where they have no, you know, like,
Yeah. So yeah, and then you know, society still is, oh well, why do Indigenous people do XYZ? And it's like, well, this has been centuries going on in the making, you know, and of course things are going to come to a head at some point. And it's just so ironic that it's almost always the Indigenous communities that are painted as bad. You know,
because it's not a
Well,
reflection of their character. It's like
Yeah.
a reflection of their trauma
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
Exactly.
their
think
lack of
about it,
options. And like,
So there's
Mhm.
one part
You
in the
know?
book where he had to get 10 teeth taken out because
Yes.
right?
At one time.
he had to do it all at one time because they
Yeah.
only will cover one appointment. Like
Yes.
stuff like that. Like my son had to get some cavities done, and they wouldn't even let him do both sides on the same
Mhm.
appointment because they're like, oh, we wouldn't want to freeze him on both sides. That might be
Yes.
uncomfortable. But let's pull 10 teeth on the same day
From a child, you know,
from a
and
child, because
I
you only
think
get
in-
coverage
yes.
once a year.
Mhm. And
Like,
that's another
that's-
thing too, is, you know, you'll hear society say, oh well, Indigenous people, they get free healthcare, they get et cetera, and it's obviously it's a lot better than what it was back when he was a child, but at the same time, we're still going through hoops, you know. There's so much limitations to it, and all this free stuff is, you know, it sometimes causes more issues in the end.
It's like
might be
begrudgingly
expensive
free.
to access.
Yes,
It might be
You know, it's like
expensive to
begrudgingly
access,
free.
right?
It's like, oh
Yeah,
yeah, here, we'll give
exactly.
it to you. Like, but you
Mhm.
have to get all 10 teeth pulled in one thing because we're not paying for
Yeah.
more than that. Like, it's
Yeah.
not like, let us take care of you.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
like-
It's almost, it feels like the government is annoyed that they have to do this, and so it's like, how can we make this as annoying and hard
yeah.
for you as possible?
Yeah.
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 It's like
That's
pulling
brutal.
teeth to get anything from them, you know?
Pulling teeth.
That's right.
That was well done. That was well
Thank you,
done.
thank you. Yes.
Mic drop. I'm up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm
And on
out.
that note.
Yeah.
If you've enjoyed these video highlights, listen to the full episode on our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. Remember to like and subscribe and ring that bell to be notified when new episodes are published. Find out more by going to www.bookinterrupted.com.
Never forget, every child matters.